I'm Evan Myers, and welcome to another edition of Clear the Air. I'm here with AccuWeather.com's Joe Bastardi, and I have a long list that you're an expert senior meteorologist, you're an expert hurricane forecaster, you're an expert long-range forecaster. Joe, you're just an expert.
I'm probably someone that doesn't clear the air, though. Things tend to get more crowded.
No. We clear the air, and I always ask, so what? And I'm going to ask you, so what?
Okay.
But last week we had Bernie Rayner on, and he was talking about El Nino, but I thought we'd get a little bit more in depth than that. And so we started that conversation, so let's kind of continue it with you.
Well, first of all, the pro site at AccuWeather.com, this conversation started in January.
It absolutely did.
And so there are a lot of people now that are getting on the train, and they're way, way back at the end of the caboose over there because we've been pulling this train.
But you're the engineer, Joe. You've been driving the engine.
This is my El Nino. This is the start of El Nino.
So let's take a look at that. We have this first graphic up here, and these are kind of elementary things, so we'll go through this pretty quickly. And Bernie talked a little bit about this last week, but why don't you espouse on it a little bit more and talk about El Nino and how it happens and what the global impacts are, and then we'll get down to the U.S.
Well, first of all, this is a reactive El Nino. In other words, it is reacting to the La Nina we have, and you see this quite often. In fact, most of the La Ninas and El Ninos dance with each other. So this, because it's a reactive El Nino, it has already begun. It is a top-down. It's an atmospheric oceanic interplay, so to speak, and the atmosphere is driving the train over here, which means when we get to the winter season, it'll probably just fall apart. Now, that means that when you see this, when you see the water is not yet above normal, but the El Nino effects have already begun where you and I live, Evan, in the atmosphere.
Well, if the water isn't already above normal and it's heading in that direction, does that mean the effects of this El Nino are going to be more significant than past El Ninos? That's an interesting question.
Well, the El Nino is like a football player that gets recruited, for instance. How good is that guy?
Joe always has these great analogies,
it's true.
but he always gets to the answer, so we're going to get there.
No, but it's true. How good is that recruit going to be? It all depends on the people around him. There are many, many things going on all over the world right now that you have to look at. For instance, we are in what we call cold PDO. The Pacific is in its cooling cycle like it was in the early 50s. The solar constant is different than it was with the last El Nino, or the same kind of situation is not going on. So all El Ninos are not created equal.
Okay, so that's what this says. They're not all the same. So what's the impact going to be on the U.S.? And we're going to move on to that. We have a couple of graphics that you prepared for us, and this is the computer forecast for this summer. Why don't you explain what that means, the computer forecast?
Well, first of all, the impacts have started. You got a big drought going on in India. There's no monsoon. The monsoon started and fell apart like it did in 2006. The hurricane season, the deep tropical part of the hurricane season is going to get chopped apart. This year, storms that hit the United States, if we have any, they might not even be on the weather charts 3 or 4 days before because they may develop in close to the coast. The tornado season got cut apart. The first evidence was the big spring rains in the southeast. Second wettest spring in Atlanta's history.
And Bernie and I talked about that because, all the reservoirs have filled up. And it's a complete reversal.
But what's interesting
I got that wrestling thing
that's right. What's interesting about that is usually during the warm AMO, like we have now, the southeast is usually in drought and they need the El Nino. Good news for California, you're probably going to get more rain this winter, for instance. So you're already starting to see the effects.
Well, you just talked about a bunch of impacts, and that's one of the things we talk about here is what are the impacts. We can talk about technical jargon and all kinds of stuff. So you talked about India. So what impact is that going to have worldwide, the fact that that reversal has happened in India?
That already shows you that, for instance, that the strength of the monsoon is less than normal, so you don't expect an active African wave season. As far as the summer forecast goes, the models have linked up remarkably to the analogs, and they look like the same thing. So the computer model has a very cool summer forecast over the northern plains of the United States.
Winter.
And then the winter. Now, it's fascinating watching the winter. If we look at this analog back to this long-standing train I've been on, which is 4950, the change in the climatic cycle back then. The winter of 51-52 was not very cool in the eastern part of the United States. But if we look toward the solar constant...
So global warming is starting back then, right?
You're flagged for instigation. Now, if we look to the solar constant, how close is we have this cold PDO, we have the El Nino, a reactive El Nino to the solar constant. Last time was 76, 77, when they were writing about ice ages.
That's exactly right. We had all those big snowstorms. It was very cold for
several
winters.
It was more cold than snow, I'll tell you that.
So let's, you pick this graphic that we can hopefully get up here. There we go. Yeah. The summer of 2004.
That is probably...
Why'd you pick that? Even though it was 5 years ago.
Well, it's probably overall, as far as temperatures go, the closest summer to this one across the United States. Much of the United States was cooler than normal. I don't want people to start thinking, oh, Florida's going to get hit by 5 hurricanes. Different situation going on.
That was an active year,
okay,
right?
That was an active year. And also, the relationship between the water temperature in the Caribbean and the Pacific was not nearly as great, biased warm in the Pacific as it is this year. In other words, it was warmer in the Pacific with the El Nino, but we had a lot of very warm water in the Atlantic.
So let's relate that to this year, and this is a summer forecast for this year. Already in the Northeast, summer has begun, but it's kind of cool in some places.
Well, it's nothing compared to the northern plains. I mean, when it snows in Dickinson, North Dakota on June 2nd.
And talk about a year without a summer in the northern plains. Is that going to happen? We've been hearing about that from certain sources. So here you are. Define it and tell us what's going to happen.
I believe we have a shot in the lakes, for instance, of a top 5 cool summer in the last 50 years. Okay, that's all I said about that. And you know, you get people in New York City, if it doesn't hit 95 days, we didn't have a summer this year. So you know, that's a matter of how people feel about it. But this was our summer forecast, and summer begins June, July, August, the 3 warmest months of the year. That's the summer season. So summer is already begun.
Meteorological summer as opposed to astronomical summer, which starts in the end of June.
Yeah, when the sun starts sinking.
But the 3 warmest months are the ones you just talked about.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's what we believe it'll wind up looking like. I think it will be warmer than normal somewhat in Texas and in the western part of the United States. We'll try to straighten back out in the Rockies. But here's if you want to say, so what, guess what? Air conditioning bills won't be through the roof this particular summer season.
That's interesting because that area covers the Midwest, and it does extend over in the western part of the Northeast. And what about the major cities in Boston and Philly?
Well, I think they'll wind up near normal. I think it's people might remember it more as humid than getting hot. And you know, let's put it this way: folks in Chicago and Detroit may say, "Is it ever going to hit 90 degrees?" It may hit 90 again in the Northeast quarter, but let's remember, just like that 76 example, right? The April of 76 and Easter Sunday, the hottest temperature of the entire warm season. Right. Don't be surprised if that April heat wave for some of you in the northeastern part of the United States was your hottest temperature of the summer.
So, Joe, we've set a record here. This is the longest clear the air in history. But I'm going to ask you one more question, which I figured we would do with you. But I have one more. That's okay. We have one more question, and you alluded to it a little bit, and I think this is something that's important that will relate to people as far as energy bills are concerned in the Midwest and in the Northeast. You know, how do you foresee that playing out this summer? Do you think that's going to have a significant impact?
I've been telling my clients, and you know what I do when people see me, that's a tip of the iceberg, so to speak, what I do.
Well, you should give a plug for that.
On our energy site.
Okay.
But I've been telling clients from the get-go since the spring that I do not think this is a stressful summer as far as cooling degree days go, population weighted, all right? And we're not talking about Texas, which is its own old little country down there, right? You go to Texas if you want to leave.
I understand that.
But most of the United States, the big areas up there, the Chicago's, the New York, I don't see anything out of the ordinary as far as cooling degree days.
So that actually is a really significant impact in that energy bills will at least be same or lower than they might otherwise be in a normal summer.
Yeah, well, let's put
maybe the bills, because now we're talking about the prices of it.
I have nothing
to
do with
energy usage you're talking about.
Yeah, relative to the economy, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, Joe, come back on at the end of the summer, and we'll see how all this correlated.
Yeah, right or wrong. If I'm right, then I can gloat. If I'm wrong, then you can hit me.
No, I wouldn't do that at all.
Figuratively.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm a peace lover too.
Thank you very much. And join us next time when we clear the air.